I want to thank our CSL music team and Karen Mitchell for the music today, and Nicole Palmer for doing our reading. This is the fourth week in our 5-week series on the book by Natalie Kogan, Happier Now. Each week is an independent message, and of course I hope you watch all of the entire series. It's one of the wonderful things about Facebook and YouTube services. You can always go back and look at the previous ones, and they're all available from links on our website. This week we continue our series of 3 weeks where we're talking about anchoring ourselves in happiness. And today we're concentrating on recognizing that gratitude can bring us more happiness, that we can live in the valley of joy rather than that valley of suffering that I talked about a couple weeks ago. And finally, that we can choose to look through a lens of compassion and create acts of intentional kindness as a way to be happier now. Imagine what might happen if we created a life in which we lived more gratefully and more accepting of what is and of how people behave, and we're intentionally kind in all circumstances. That's exactly what we're discussing today. But first, the question of the week. What is the one choice that you can make today to recognize that gratitude enhances happiness, to create connection through acceptance, and to be intentionally kind so as to be happier now? One more time. What is the one choice that you can make today to recognize gratitude enhances happiness, to create connection through acceptance, and to be intentionally kind so as to be happier now? Natalie Kogan, in her section on gratitude, wrote this: "One of the benefits of acceptance is that it allows us to more clearly witness our reality as it is, and with a bit of practice, find moments of joy or meaning, even if things aren't so wonderful overall." That truly is the key to being happier now, is it not? Finding those moments of joy, even if things aren't going the way we expected them to go. I just returned from Portland because one of my best friends was celebrating her 70th birthday. The afternoon before her party, the caterer canceled on her. He had good reasons, and yet here she was, stuck in a bind with all these people showing up in a party that she'd been planning for 6 months. And the people were coming expecting to have a meal together. My friend Anne could have gone into a tailspin. Instead, she created a new plan. I think she's one of the most accepting people I know on the planet, and she was grateful for help and for all the joy of the party. In Spiritual Economics, Eric Butterworth wrote this: "Don't let the outer happening squeeze you into its box, but open your mind to the flow of wisdom and love and good judgment with which you can deal masterfully with it. It has come to pass. Accept it, but accept it as a changing experience that is on its way out. Something better is on the way for you." I think it's easy for us to fall into that outer experience and allow it to squeeze us into a box, into that valley of suffering. We forget that this too shall pass. Accepting what is so much better and a far better way to live. That's the way that Anne graciously moved through her challenge, accepting it and knowing something better was on the way. It was a fabulous party, and the pizza and other prepared food was absolutely delightful. And I even got a chance to be a bartender, which I haven't done in years. Anne is amazingly resilient, probably because she so readily goes with the flow and practices forgiveness along the way. Natalie Kogan reminds us, when something terrible happens, finding even a few things we appreciate contributes to our resilience. It reminds us that our life is richer and brighter than the current crisis that we are facing. She further reminds us, practicing gratitude amidst challenges has nothing to do with lying to ourselves or cheating on reality. It's not about being grateful for something being awful, but rather making a courageous choice to focus on something good, however small, within the awful. I'm sure you've all heard the story of Viktor Frankl, who spent a lot of his life in concentration camps. Talk about a challenge. And during that time, he developed a concept which is called tragic optimism. Frankl realized that optimism wasn't about having illusions, but rather about recognizing that we can choose our attitude even under the most dire circumstances. Sometimes what we have to be grateful for is just our ability and our freedom to make our own choice. In his book on Man Searching for Meaning, he wrote this: man can reserve a vestige of spiritual freedom, independence of mind, even in such terrible conditions of psychic and physical stress, like his concentration camp. Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. Let's pause for a moment and be grateful for our ability to choose our attitude, whatever the circumstances. Kogan provides a savoring exercise that I'd like to try right now with you. It's on page 114 of her book. Make a conscious effort to savor something. It can be something you eat, see, smell, touch, or hear. Begin by taking a deep breath and focusing your attention on what you're doing. Allow yourself to simply be in the moment. Do not multitask. As you eat, watch, or listen, pay attention to all the senses. What do you feel, see, taste, smell, hear? Think of this as taking a mental photo of the moment. Finally, when you're done, feel a sense of gratitude for having experienced it, including toward people who made it possible, even if you don't know them. For example, the farmer who grew the piece of fruit that you had enjoyed, or the truck driver who delivered the fruit to the store where you bought it. Savoring is an amazing experience that can really help us live in the moment and be grateful for all that we have. How was that for you? Imagine if we choose our own way by taking time each day to savor something in our life. There are great benefits to this practice, as Kogan tells us. The beauty of practicing gratitude is that it doesn't only help us to persevere through difficult times, but also amplifies the good in our lives when things are going okay. Like a magnifying glass, gratitude helps us savor and truly experience the small moments of joy or contentment that are already there. The same moments we might otherwise not notice as we rush through our busy lives and routines. And speaking of rushing through our busy lives, it's easy sometimes to forget the niceties of gratitude and kindness. The simple thank you when you actually truly look the person in the eye and let them know you mean it. The smile as you check out at the grocery store. The small offer of help to someone who might be struggling with packages or with opening a door. We must not allow our rushed lives to allow us to forget to be grateful and kind. In our last segment, I talked a little bit about the valley of suffering. This week, I'd like to talk about the valley of joy. Kogan tells us in this section that she traveled to Tanzania to share her happiness skills with a group of young girls who attended the Secondary Education for Girls Advancement School. These girls came from extreme poverty. They had nothing that was extra. Sure, they had room and board, and they had their school uniforms. They also had the books that were in the library. But they had no toys, no phones, no jewelry, nothing that we would consider possibly even part of our everyday lives. They certainly were prime candidates for living in the valley of suffering. Yet when she asked them what they were grateful for, here's a few of the answers that she got. I'm grateful that we have peanut butter at the school. I'm grateful that I have both of my parents, both mother and father. I'm grateful to have good teachers who care about me. I'm grateful because I have all the basic needs met at school. I'm grateful we have computers. I'm grateful because I am alive. As you can see, the girls were grateful for very basic things. They were choosing to live in the valley of joy around the good things that they had in their life. I'd like to further notice that they experienced such poverty that their gratitude was at a totally different level than I suspect ours might be. We've adapted to a life of good bounty. And I think there's many good times that we just don't recognize the gratitude we should have for all that we have. Perhaps we might remember these girls who are just trying to survive and overcome the challenges that they have to face in their daily lives. We often just take for granted those things that are part of our daily lives and that they actually saw as something to be extremely grateful for. Having their basic needs met. So I invite you right now to take a moment and think about what it might be like to not have fresh water, to not have clean drinking water, to live without electricity or the comforts that we live with. It puts a new spin on all the things for which we can be grateful, doesn't it? Why not choose to live in the valley of joy for all that we have? And we do that by using our lens of compassion. What do I mean by a lens of compassion? I mean that we see through the eyes of compassion and love. I talk a lot about looking at things and recognizing that everyone is either sending out love or calling for love. In her book, Natalie talks about a workshop in which groups analyze why people are rude or unkind. The final conclusion in the study was that when these participants recognize other people are typically rude or unkind because they're struggling with something, it changed how they saw them. That's why I say when people are calling for love, we have to return that call for love, be it rudeness or anger or unkindness. It's essential that we learn to answer that call with love rather than with anger coming back or unkindness going back or us being rude as well. Chris Michaels, in his Your Soul's Assignment, wrote this: if every person knew they were loved and accepted by God exactly as they are right now, the world could be instantly transformed. The power of that acceptance and the sense of safety it brings could change people's lives overnight. And since the way that we recognize being loved and accepted is through other people on the planet, why not be the face of God, the hands of God, the arms and the feet, the walking person on this planet as God? And when someone is sending out rudeness or unkindness or anger, be the face of God and let them know that they are loved and accepted exactly as they are right now. I was watching a lot of tennis last week because Wimbledon was on, and I readily admit I'm a tennis junkie. I guess there are worse vices in the world. Anyway, I was thinking about Arthur Ashe, the only black person to ever win Wimbledon, and the only black person to ever win the U.S. Open or the Australian Open for that matter. He was playing tennis in a time when he had to make an extreme effort to be accepting of other people's unkindness, of other people's rudeness, even under circumstances when he was an excellent tennis player and so deserved to be admired. He said this once, and I think it's worth us hearing. Our efforts, though largely forgotten, may bear fruit in multiple ways. In a life helped here, in a simple future brightened there. The purest joy comes in living with purpose, in trying to help others. Ashe was a great example of accepting things under difficult circumstances, and he helped many underprivileged persons throughout his life through his examples and his many charities. But you don't have to be rich or famous to create connections through acceptance. I have a congregant who every month sends in a check for the church, and I truly appreciate that she sends in the check. But what I absolutely love is that when I get her check, it comes with a small note, handwritten, and always about gratitude and thanks, either to me personally or to the community. It's just a little note about something that happened during the last month, or about her gratitude for me being her minister. But those notes make such a difference in my life, especially on days when ministry is difficult, and it can be. And they continue to bear fruit because occasionally I dig one out and just reread it to renew myself. I imagine she has no real idea of the impact of the joy that those little notes bring into my life. And yes, I am going to write her a little note and thank her this week. I should have done it a long time ago, but I've been thinking about how do we create connection through acceptance. What if you spent a couple minutes today or someday this week and wrote a note to someone who's made a difference in your life? A handwritten note that lets them know that you really care about them being in your life and the things that they did to make your life better. What better way to be kind than to spread the news of gratitude to someone? You heard Nicole today read about the happiest people in the Grant study being ones with good relationships. Connection is essential in our lives. In fact, Nicole read these words of George Valiant. Warmth of relationships through life has the greatest positive impact on life satisfaction. And we create that connection and warmth through accepting what is happening around us and finding that one small thing that we can be grateful for in our relationships, even in the challenging ones. Piero Ferrucci wrote, "The true benefits of kindness is being kind. Perhaps more than any other factor, kindness gives meaning and value to our life, raises us above our troubles or our battles, and makes us feel good about ourselves." Think about the last time you did a good deed for somebody. I imagine that you got a great deal of joy out of it, especially if you were able to see the impact it had on them. Psychologist Ed Diner and other researchers show that the frequency of positive experiences has greater impact on us and on how good we feel than the intensity of those experiences. So small moments of joy actually can make us happier than one big joyful experience. I used to tell my partner that it was the little things that mattered, and it looks now like we have research that backs that up. So what if your intentional act of kindness this week was to choose someone each day that you haven't connected with lately and send them a text or give them a call and just check in with them and see how they're doing. Let them know that they're important in your life. Or maybe you could set your phone so that at 10 o'clock in the morning, it dings, and if you hadn't already done an intentional act of kindness, you could do something for someone, or it would remind you to be intentionally kind in some way throughout the rest of the day. My family hugged before it was fashionable to hug. And when I was really young, no matter who was in our house when we went to bed, my sister and I actually hugged them goodnight. I just recently discovered that there's something called the hug hormone. It's oxytocin. It's a hormone that makes people feel really good. Wow, I didn't know when I was hugging all of those people that we were releasing a hug hormone into our bodies that was making us feel really good. Natalie Kogan tells us that we're hardwired for kindness. And what you might know is that oxytocin, the hug hormone, can lower your blood pressure, and it improves heart health because it dilates the blood vessels. I think that one of the reasons that COVID might have been so hard on me was that I wasn't getting all my hugs. And it's probably one of the reasons that the people in the study that we talked about and that Nicole read about was that those with stronger relationships actually tended to be healthier. It's great news that we're hardwired to be kind, and kindness keeps us healthier. So if we're hardwired to be kind, why is it that sometimes we feel it's so difficult to be kind? When that person cuts you off in traffic, or someone actually says something that hurts your feelings. Kogan gives us a few questions that might help us overcome our obstacles to kindness. I'm paraphrasing them, but here's the gist of it. Think about how you're feeling and what it was that might bring about the difficulties that you're having being kind to that person. Ask yourself if there's some things, even if they're really small, that you appreciate about that person. Try to remember a time when that person did something kind for you, and remember how it made you feel. Ask yourself what good might come from having the courage to be kind to that person in the situation that's going on. And I think that last one is particularly pertinent when something happens and somebody's rude to us in some way and they're a stranger. What good might come from you having the courage to just be kind in that moment? Nancy was telling me yesterday that when she was at the museum where she works, somebody came in and was just irate about the fact that they had to pay to see the museum. And the person just reamed her out. Now, she has no control over the fact that the museum charges for people to come through. And if we want the museum to stay in business, we need income for that museum to be able to do the upkeep and actually have the building. Now, Nancy, being the person she is, was going to respond to him in a kind way. He stormed off and didn't receive her kindness, but it doesn't take away from the fact that in that moment, Nancy chose to be kind rather than to respond in a not so kind way. Have you ever considered that our busy schedules sometimes make it easy for us to forget to be kind? I wonder what the world would be like if we decided each week to schedule some kindness. Put that reminder in your phone that I was talking about. Or write yourself a little note or a Post-it sticker and put it somewhere that you're going to see it during the day to remind yourself to send out a little bit of kindness. That's going to help you be happier and healthier, and it's also going to help the person that you're kind to be happier and healthier. So let's be happier now, and let's be kinder now. So in summary, decide this week to develop some anchors for happiness by recognizing gratitude enhances our happiness. Don't let the outer happenings squeeze you into a box. Find something good, however small, within the awful. Create connection through acceptance. Live in the valley of joy like those young girls, rather in a valley of suffering. And know that your efforts bear fruit in multiple ways. Be intentionally kind. Give up any too busy stories, and remember that the frequency of kindness has greater impact than the intensity of kindness. And if people are feeling okay about it, give a few hugs and release some of that hug hormone that makes us feel really good and healthier. So here's your affirmation for the week. How is it that I so easily and willingly make the choice today to recognize gratitude enhances happiness, to create connection through acceptance, and to be intentionally kind so as to be happier now? So your challenge this week is to do one act of intentional kindness each day as your happiness anchor. Choose one person to contact each day, or do something unexpected for someone. Buy a coffee for the next person in line by just leaving the money for a coffee with the cashier. Be certain to not let what's happening squeeze you out of a box. So just notice when something steals your happiness and look for the good in it, or look for how you can respond in a way that sends love rather than unkindness. So let's pray. So we just take a deep, nourishing breath. And we settle into that place where we feel loved and acceptance. Into that place where we know that the divine lives within us. Into that place where we feel so good when something great is happening on the outside. And we know that that place is the place of the divine. The place where love and joy and peace and ease and grace lives. And as individual expressions of God, each of us has all of that running through us, settled into us as the essence of who we are. And what I know to be the truth is that each day this week, each moment, we are living in a world of kindness. That we are sending out love in every circumstance. That we are recognizing that anything that looks other than kindness or love is just a call for it, and we are answering that call with loving kindness. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the people in this community that know how to live and act in kind ways, that recognize that we are indeed filled with loving kindness, and we can spread it. And it's from all that gratitude that I release these words into the law of mind, spirit, and action, knowing the truth that the divine has already called it good, that our lives are already enhanced by all the acts of kindness that we are experiencing and giving out in the coming days. So knowing that God has already called it done, I can just accept it and release it and say amen. And we can affirm it together. And so it is.